Director, IT Basis Fund Services Mumbai, and a fireside chat with Hardik Parekh, Senior Consultant, Satwa. Hello, sir.
Hi, very good morning. Hope everybody's caffeinated enough. And if I had to make a word cloud of the opening of today's event, I think I heard the word AI a lot. So clearly the pressure's on us, Rakesh and Dr. Sujata. But obviously when all of us think about AI, the first thing everybody thinks of is ChatGPT. And by a quick show of hands, who here has used ChatGPT in any way, shape or form? These are fewer hands than I was expecting. Okay, quite a few there. So obviously, when we think of AI, we first think of ChatGPT, but it's a lot more than that, right? And just a few figures when I was reading up our topic. AI, it seems, has the potential to add roughly $15.5 trillion to the global economy by 2030, I think. Niti Aayog has said in India alone, AI can add $1 trillion to the Indian economy by 2035. IBM has come out with a system which can detect lung cancer with a 93% accuracy, contrasting to 65% accuracy, say, by a human doctor. It's expected to increase the accuracy of climate models by 60%. MasterCard has said that since they've introduced AI in their systems, fraudulent transactions have gone down by some 40-odd%. So clearly there's a lot of scope for the potential of AI. And what I'm hoping to do today is cover three broad parts in our discussion. We'll try and explore it. Firstly, of course, the potential of AI for social good. Segueing quickly into the second part, which is the Indian AI landscape as it stands today. And lastly, and very importantly, how do we bolster the AI solution ecosystem? And of course, what the role of CSR can be here. Now, we've been here before, and I think Rakesh sir has been part of a lot of the initiatives with digital public infrastructure. So the use case has been prepared by India. We've seen Aadhaar UPI, how transformative they've been. Bringing it to AI, what do you think the potential of AI is to solve population scale problems in India?
Hey, thank you, Hardik. And thank you so much for having me here. It was a wonderful, hearing all the sessions before this. So, when he asked the question, how many of you have used GPT, I could, see about 20% of the hands raised. So therefore, I'll narrate a small story. So, the way I understand generative AI or AI is, how do we believe that the child learns? If we want the child to learn between a cat and a dog, do we give them rules that, dog has, pointed ears, cat has whiskers? No. They look at and it is the trust that they have on their parents when they tell them this is a dog, this is a cat. So their foundational learning starts with trust. And that is what changed in November 2022 when ChatGPT got launched, OpenAI launched it. What they did is they created systems, they created an LLM which learned on data. And it was not a rules-based AI anymore, it learned on data. So just like a child based on trust starts learning, the system starts learning on trust. And how does the trust build? The data started getting labeled. The label was, this is a dog, this is a cat. And the system is much better than rules because there could be a smaller cat or there could be a bigger cat and the system could go wrong. So that's where ChatGPT made the difference. And the difference was because there was data, internet data, available at large, and they were able to label it and create that intelligence with that system. Also, that system was able to create the next best letter or the word, which allowed them to generate the capability of generation. Now, if we look at it in the context of India, the question that Hardik asked was with the whole DPI. So the whole DPI story in India actually we all should be extremely proud of what India has done. In fact, we lead the whole world in creating population scale infrastructure when it comes to government. And it is not, left to just Aadhaar, which was, the first such attempt where a registry was created for others to leverage what they wanted to do. But after that, I think the whole formula of how to create population scale infrastructure India was able to decode. And what that primarily is, if you look at, say, health, you create registries, you create patient registries, you create doctor registries, you create lab registries, and then you have a messaging layer which allows it to interact. And we have similar DPIs which are coming up in agriculture, which is smart agriculture, where there's a farmer registry, where there is, land registry, and you start interacting with all of that. And at the top of it sits something very similar to a UPI. So there is, similar for health is called UHI. And just yesterday, I think a couple of days back, RBI launched the Universal Lending Platform, a ULI, which leverages the land records or the land registry that is being created by the agriculture piece. So there is a lot of, with 1.3 billion people using this infrastructure, there's a huge amount of data that is getting created. And remember, data is the thing which is helping us make our LLMs smarter. And therefore, India is generating a huge amount of data basis the digital public infrastructure that has got created. And also the fact that connectivity in India is affordable and reliable, like not many other countries. So therefore, many of us believe that India is going to be the use case factory of AI for the world. So it is for the people in this room to start thinking and evangelizing what use cases would be more beneficial for your CSR work or any other work that you're doing at large. But I think as we dwell deeper, happy to, Hardik, go deeper into what kind of other enablements government has created for the people in this room to leverage as you conceive and implement your programs. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thanks, Hardik, for that question. I'm Dr. Sujata Sheshadrinathan. Coming from the background of technology, AI, as we look at it, moves in several levels. First of all, you have AI, which was, if you ask me if AI is new, AI is not new. AI has been around for quite some time. So when we taught the machine to do rule-based thinking and do our programming and processing, at that point itself, we have started interacting with AI. Now, AI has gone further ahead. AI has developed retention-based systems. So when Rakesh was mentioning the LLM and what we have today, the large language models, which ChatGPT was basically based on that. But we want to develop on and progress further into NLPs, which is natural language processing, which is actually the next stage of AI. And then we come on to domain-specific AI practices, So when you have these kind of different platforms on which you want to develop artificial intelligence itself means thinking and then teaching the machine to think like you. So if I'm sitting here now, there's one thing that struck me. There's a clock right in front of me. That is such a small thing, but that is a thing that impacts the speakers quite a bit, especially a person like me with an OCD for time. So such things and such applications, when you look around you, you can find a lot of, for instance, another small example. How many of us in this room are feeling cold right now? Right? Would you not like someone to sense it? We all know that there is an application available. There is a thermostat control that is already there in the air conditioning, which is probably not doing its job too well. So if we have a system, for instance, that could sense how many, or rather record data about what is the mean temperature people are using and at what temperature are people switching off the AC. Imagine the amount of energy you could be saving. You could actually manufacture ACs with that kind of capabilities. When I started teaching, and I am from the technology background, as I said, I used to teach micro Java. I used to teach something that could actually help you control a lot of devices using what was called a palm. Those days there was something called a palm. It was like a digital diary. Believe it or not, micro Java was actually the grandfather of Android. Today, how many of you have mood sensing lights in your bedrooms that you can control through your phones? People like me, traditional human beings like me did test it. I'm like, I'm not putting that data into my machine. But when we made the house, our kids insisted on it. So you have the next generation coming in, which is taking AI and its applications for granted. That is the difference that we have to understand. So here when we are sitting and evaluating what are the possibilities for India in AI, it is unlimited. All it takes is for a mind to think differently. And we have got a whole lot of application possibilities that exist, and the talent as well as government backing that is necessary for this kind of application development exists in India today. There are many challenges which I am sure we are going to discuss as we go along, but as long as you have data, as long as you have the availability of the data and the access. So first point is for the data to be captured. So to give you an example, India-centric example, I don't know how many of you caught the news about AgriStack yesterday. AgriStack, it is about agriculture, okay? Do you know who announced it? It was announced by Ashwini Vaishnav, who is actually the Information and Broadcasting and the mighty Minister of India, not the Agriculture Minister. The reason being very simple. India in its outlook has completely changed. Okay, so you have a minister sitting up there who's looking at capturing that data so that he can actually build the systems around the number of applications of the AgriStack which intends to onboard farmers. The numbers that they are intending to onboard is massive, and they are intending to onboard farmers onto the AgriStack using something like a user ID akin to Aadhaar. Can you imagine the amount of data they will be gathering by that? So you have artificial intelligence actually being thought about at the brass tacks level, which is all about first capturing the data. So yes, India is there and we are deep into the game.
No, ma'am, I think you made a very interesting point because I think it's easy, we get lost in trying to understand how AI works. Where let's face it, unless you come from a tech background, it's going to take you some serious learning to understand what a foundational model is and what the compute behind it is. I think the more relevant question to be asking is, can we be use case led? Well, okay, this tech exists, there's a system that can be built using that tech, but what is the problem really that I want to solve or can be solved using that tech is perhaps the more pertinent question to ask. In that way, and just wanted to ask you, are there specific examples, this could be across healthcare, climate, financial inclusion, environment, education, specific examples you've seen of AI being used to solve a social problem in India or in the rest of the world? And maybe part two of that question is, what are some emerging use cases that you see? What are some mature use cases that you see? And what are some very, very clear white spaces where we've not even thought about AI can be used to solve that particular problem?
So of course, yes. The stage where today, at least the generative AI is, as ma'am said, AI has been there for long. But since it is topical to talk about Gen AI and which has made the real impact for last more than 2 years now, I think everybody is going the use case way. But I think the good part about India is that we have created a good data fabric for the country. Last nearly a decade, we have been working on APIs, enabling, she talked about the MeitY, the guidelines were clear for every infrastructure that gets created. They create APIs so that data becomes shareable. There was a mechanism of consent-based data so that the intent was that every individual in India becomes data rich so that the data can be captured and used for public good. Now having said that, so we are sitting pretty well as a country with the right policy framework where it's a very balanced view that India has on privacy and on use of data as well as on creating this infrastructure. As regards use cases, a couple of use cases that I've seen in India, although many of them still happen to be at the pilot stage, many may not have reached a population scale rollout. Some of them are in the healthcare. For example, for detection of typhoid, you could, the system is trained on cough. So it's a typhoid cough, it's not a typhoid cough. And you could train the system and, you can do it at scale. The other is there was a challenge with respect to maternal mortality in the country and child mortality in the country. And it had something to do with the weighing scale, the manual weighing scale that we have. And Vadvani AI was able to create that by taking a picture of the baby, you could get to the weight of the baby, and the system is quite accurate. We all are aware and heard that systems, confidence in the systems, accuracy of the systems improves with time. So having done all of that, the system is pretty accurate in the pilots that they have done. So all of these things that I'm talking about can be done at scale. But alongside that, I think there is also a lot of effort which is being put into helping our frontline workers. Today we all know, these ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, while they do a lot of work, but they get these applications, multitude of applications they're supposed to support and give data to. And the same data they feed into multiple places, for NHM differently or for, some other program differently. Now, you could create a co-pilot, and it's already in the works, which kind of works with them so that at least their administrative work, becomes easy for them. So there are these kinds of use cases, at least, which are emerging, but yet to see population scale. And the other most, important, or where we have invested time, is Bhashini. I think the accessibility by enabling services through voice or language could become, could overcome the barrier that we have in accessibility. And Bhashini is a good example of that. And so I think these are some of the use cases, Hardik, which are, enabling today Gen AI or AI to reach masses and create that impact that without it would be difficult to achieve.
So your question has two levels in it for me. First level is the use cases, and the second level is the social impact of this technology. So as far as AI itself is concerned, what is so arresting and why has it grabbed people's attention is because of its ability, of its two-pronged ability. I mean, this is a challenge that all of us in any field of work usually face. The challenge of mass versus customization. Customization comes with a cost, and mass is, of course, where the profits lie. So AI gives you the edge where you can balance the two. You can actually have mass level data and then move it on to customization, in fact, to what is called hyper customization also. To give you an example of this, there was a thought about, this loan processing. I'm sorry, I'm sure all of you have heard of the TREDS platform also of India, who big time, the growth in the SME sector is big time attributed to the TREDS platform. So what happens in these cases is that the market has sensed the requirement for a particular product, and data regarding that product has been collected, and that data has been inferred, it has been analyzed to draw a lot of inferences. In this exercise, what can now happen is that you can actually fine-tune the data. For instance, I was just talking about the agri-stack. All the farmers out there, and in fact, a lot of us have faced this issue in our regular lives also, you are given certain solutions which are not always applicable for you. So they want to get on to in fact, I've heard about this being discussed yesterday, that they want to get on to a situation where real-time data of that particular place where a farmer is intending to do his work, it could be very far off from the recommendations, Actual situation on the ground could be different from the recommendation because of a host of reasons. So they are intending to capture these reasons and come out with hyper-specific, hyper-customized solution. When you think about AI and India use cases in this context, sky is the limit. There have been talks, and this is also a possibility where, see, the social impact-wise, where does this whole thing come into picture? You have got loans, you've got financial institutions. How many of these reach everyone, as in everyone? So when you want to talk about AI, you're talking about it because of this ability to reach what is called the unserviced sectors. So in some financial discussions, you do have discussions that are happening about how to support, how to create loan structures for tribal areas. Their requirements are different. They don't have the ability to pay back like us, but they have different abilities, they have different requirements. They may have a different skills set out there, which you may want to support. So the reachability of solutions to hitherto unserviced sectors, like for instance, reaching education to certain areas in the South African continent. These are the kind of social impact or socially relevant structures that are possible through the use of AI. And again, here I'm not shooting in the dark. These are all very possible. A lot of these applications are already being built. As we speak, people are already considering, already collecting data for these. The UN Sustainable Development Growth, the SDG of UN, is another very critical component where AI worldwide is very active. I am sure we can take lessons from those, in fact, teach them lessons, because the figures that I come across for AI, in fact, I get into Web3 discussions, I get into blockchain discussions also. For India, they're very huge, sometimes quite unbelievable. But thinking about the reach and the ability of AI, okay, one question. We've been all talking about AI quite frequently since morning. Has anybody noticed one place where AI has crept in without you actually noticing it? It has crept in big time and none of us have realized it. Anybody? All of you have noticed it. Sorry? Google Maps is a very great thing, yes, but don't even go up to Maps. Google itself. Has anybody noticed how Google responses are different now? Do any search. You remember how the responses used to come earlier and now? Just go into Google and search artificial intelligence. It gives you the responses which are categorized. And under each category, you have further responses available. You have to just go click on the category and it further expands. So when I started doing my doctorate on blockchain adoption, Google Scholar was a big thing. 2018-19, Google Scholar solved a huge lot of issues for us. And we used to actually call it standing on the shoulder of giants. Yes, that was true. But now, one level, I wish I had this Google. But again, let me warn you, Google itself has failed in AI. All of us are aware of that also, I hope. Google itself withdrew some of its applications. Microsoft also has had AI failures. So when we are talking about AI, I'm sure you have an upcoming question about the challenges where we can go into this in detail. But when you're talking about AI, there are quite a lot of things that you need to keep in mind also. But if you ask about the social impact, these are the social impacts of it. The biggest social impact for me is something that we should all think about, contribution to climate. That is something that we need to think about, alleviation of poverty, reachability of financial solutions, education. These are very relevant social impacts that AI could have.
Hardik, I'll just take because you just mentioned AgriStack. So what comes to my mind is, I'm sure many of you might already know, when Aadhaar was built, a lot of people were skeptical of what is this all about. We'll capture all the biometric, and there were various mechanisms of doing it. But eventually, what happened is that they said, we will give only a yes or no. You just put your thumb and we will just tell you yes or no, we will not give your demographics out. And they left it to the industry to evangelize solutions on top of it. And thereafter, we have seen whether it was Reliance getting 40 billion customers, 40 million customers in 80 days, or we have Digi Yatra today. All of these, industries started to think of use cases. Now imagine if we have a very similar registry of farmers, and we have similar registry of land holding. And we also have a registry which also says that within that land holding, what is the crop that typically grows there. And if this data is available through APIs, each one of us has the flexibility to create or fine-tune whatever models we want to do, and with whatever we want to do with it, whether banks would want to use it for credit lending, insurance companies want to use it, or procurement agencies want to have it. But imagine what Aadhaar could do to all of us and services. Similar registries are being created in AgriStack or for HealthStack, or for that matter for commerce itself. We would have known about ONDC as a project. So all of these, if you look at it, and whenever you design your programs for CSR or thing, just think through all the digital public infrastructure available in India, which you could leverage, and more with AI, it becomes easy for you to use all of that data without getting into the intricacy of designing a lot of rules. A lot of intelligence will get built into it. Just wanted to leave that.
So that's a very interesting point, because I think lately we've seen in the last few years where, of course, the innovation and the solutions are going to come maybe from business, but unbridled innovation, quote unquote, has led to, you've seen Senate hearings, Congress hearings in the US against the tech companies. So regulation does become important. I think in the India context, the government announced the National Mission for AI earlier this year, some 10,000 odd crore over 5 years. They do want to focus on the major aspects, which is, do we have the cloud computing capacity? Do we have non-personalized data sets? But the fundamental question is, why is a regulation in AI important in the first place? Of course, we know about the hallucination risk of models that have been developed in the West. Bias risk clearly partly countered by the efforts of organizations such as the Ekstep Foundation, for example. Bhashini, what you mentioned, I think being used to basically a translation model for English to Indian languages woven in with API systems from ChatGPT. So the potential of this is huge, but while we're seeing good progress, why is regulation still important and where does it stand today in India?
So I think that's a great point. The best regulation today, or the overarching regulation today which has come in, is from EU, and which has fundamentally graded AI into 4 categories. Something which is autonomous, autonomous cars or autonomous bots, or something which is autonomous, high impact, typically has to go through a lot of clearances before it, you could do that. And that's how it comes to very simple use where where there is human in the center. Anything you do actually aids the human. The decision remains with the human is the lowest category. So that's how EU has dealt with it, and many other countries are wanting to adopt a similar way. India today does not have a regulation on AI. We may have our IT Act, we may have our mission document, which propagates how we would want to use it for health, education, economic and social progress. We may have our DPDP Act for privacy, and also the way the infrastructure was created with all the consent frameworks, etc. So as I said, today, as I believe, India has taken a very balanced view of it, that we have created enough guardrails as of now, and we would want to ensure that the data is used in the best possible manner for the individual, and not only for corporates to make money out of it, but how does data work for you to make you richer or make your life better. I think that's the intent with which our whatever policy framework or the regulatory framework works. As regards AI India mission, the biggest bottleneck for our industry today to adopt AI is the cost of compute, the GPUs, which are expensive. So therefore, large portion of this money is going to ensure that India procures these GPUs, government procures these GPUs and makes it available for innovation, whether it's for R&D or for startups, etc. So that they could, with all the DPI, all the data being created, they would want to ensure that there is enough compute available to our startup industry to enable and create more use cases. So I believe that it's an extremely balanced view as of today. Enough encouragement for everybody to use and attempt, but obviously one has to be ethical and be responsible with what you do. And today where we are with the technology, it is with human in the center. So the chances of it going haywire that much become limited.
You brought up compute specifically as a challenge, right? And this begs the question, what is the potential for, say, public-private partnerships in co-creating and co-funding AI applications for India?
Of course, I think there's a big conversation. I mean, there is a thought that with all the money that was there, the government pumped in, should we create a digital infrastructure or a digital compute bond or something like that and get, raise private money as well along with it? I think all of those conversations will go on. But fundamentally, Hardik, the issue was that there was a supply-demand gap, because there was, a company called NVIDIA which started making GPUs for gaming industry. All of a sudden, because of its multi-processing capabilities, started getting used for AI. And all of a sudden, because of the supply-demand issues, the price of that was very high. And accessibility, even getting them in time, was an issue. So therefore, making it available, making it at an affordable cost available now is important. And over a period of time, obviously, as more and more companies are investing and coming up with very similar compute at one end. And also the applications have also started changing. For example, what we saw with Apple, what they have done is they've got to an edge compute. A lot of it happens on your phone. If it doesn't happen on your phone, then they take it back. So I think the technology is evolving on that side, which might take it. Some use cases may not go to only GPUs. They may be done on edge or other compute. But technology will find its way that the cost of using this will go down. But India, I think, proactively has taken this step that they will make this compute available so that the R&D in this area continues at the scale that we would want to.
If you see the areas in which, the first thing in AI, the king is data, the size of it, sheer size of it. And of course, then comes the sensibility of that data. All data need not be good data. And the second aspect out here for public-private is that the areas, the sectors in which AI has got the maximum impact, let us say healthcare, finance, infrastructure, manufacturing, retail, all these they are all sectors where governments world over are the major players. So in this, especially with AI, given that the thing about AI is that most of the people are still lost in the euphoria of the technology, and most of us are still in the research and innovation zone. Very long gestation periods. So who's going to support this? That is a definite question out there. Public-private partnership in the domain of AI is inevitable. It is not going to work without it. So just to go back a step where you were talking about the legislations in India, why do you want this to be legislated? Why do you want there to be a statement about AI? Obviously because first, its abilities are too many, and second, the kind of biases and mistakes that you could make if the data and your innovation is not on the right track are colossal. For instance, after ChatGPT was announced, ChatGPT, by the way, is not generative in the first few phases. It is only when we give it the data, we feed it the food, that it becomes generative. So at that stage, there was a letter that was written to the world on the whole that we are actually sleepwalking into disaster. And this letter was signed by Elon Musk, and most of the signatories there were actually leading researchers in the line of AI. So the fact remains that this is a double-edged sword. First, it is expensive. It is very, very expensive to develop. Most of the systems that they try to develop in the zone of AI are not meeting with success, and therefore they need additional funding, several rounds. It happens. And second, how many of these researchers, for instance, I heard healthcare and cancer detection, I think Rakesh was also mentioning it. I recently read an article, and this is a bona fide research article, that says that dogs can be trained to sense cancer. So we have to now think about what is a more reliable, viable model, both results-wise as well as cost-wise, right? So biases in data being one of the reasons why Google's Gemini was pulled off. So we have these kind of challenges that occur with, so the testing of an AI model has to be very, very in-depth. It's the model reliability itself has to be first tested. So there are a lot of things about AI and its proliferation that are different from the other technological progresses that we have had so far. So therefore, first we've had to have the regulations so there was a Cambridge research that said that the leading countries in the world, India is not one of the leading countries in AI because probably we still lack the regulation. In fact, the Cambridge research actually noted that the regulated economies were doing much better in AI research and in AI products as such. So therefore, first of all, while we need to have the regulations in place, a lot of other consciousness also needs to creep into the people who are developing these solutions, as well as private-public partnerships are inevitable because of the nature of the data, of the nature of the products that are being developed, and also, obviously, the costs.
That provides me into an actually excellent segue into the third theme we wanted to cover, which is how do we as a group bolster the AI ecosystem, and is there a role for CSR to play, and what is that role? I'm also mindful of the time, so I'll skip to the one question I really wanted to ask. Ma'am, as you said, it's a very nascent ecosystem in India. I think as of 2024, there are some 150 generative AI startups in India cumulatively. Half of these are, by the way, based in Bangalore. $142 million of seed funding went to generative AI startups in 2024. This is only the seed funding. There was some Series A and there was relatively little Series B, C, and so on, which gives you a very clear sense of people are still trying to figure out the tech, people are still trying to figure out, is there a product market fit? They're still trying to validate the model. Do you see CSR being a catalytic investor in AI startups? And just to draw a parallel, from 2014 to 2021, only 0.2% of CSR funds in India have gone to support innovation. That's 0.2% from 2014 to 2021. Cut to 2022 to date, this has risen sharply. So we're also at a lucky juncture where ChatGPT came out in 2022 and captured the imagination of the broader public. CSR has also kind of realized that innovation is a serious avenue to deploy funding because maybe there's not enough money that can be absorbed by the traditional philanthropic sector that we think. So how do CSR strategies really need to evolve today? And this can of course be a question for the audience at large as well, because this is something you're not going to see direct returns in very measurable terms in the foreseeable future. So clearly CSR strategies need to evolve here. So a question to both of you, how do you see CSR strategies evolving to support AI? Do you see CSR playing a catalytic role as a form of funding to boost AI innovation? And of course, we'll open it up to the rest of the room as well.
So can I go at it first? Because, something that you've been saying caught my attention. The amount of money that you mentioned. So, like everyone loves their money, everyone does love money. And one of the major areas of impact for AI is finance. I don't understand how CSR is very far from finance because, of course, the goals there are more social, but you're spending huge money and you want to make sense out of the huge money. One point that you mentioned about the CSR money being deployed more sensibly nowadays could be because of governance and compliance rules that have been set by the government, probably. But if you ask me how much of impact can the AI have on the CSR as a sector, it is huge, recognized by the UN itself. And again, going back to the SDGs, many of these SDGs, the sustainable, see, AI gives you the deflection point I feel for AI, when you mention about the startups, is sustainability. That is where you still don't have many people. Ideas are dime a dozen, but given the investment into this domain, how many of these are going to be sustained and viable is a question. And that is also a question because, as I mentioned in the SDGs itself, UN itself has got some data there that shows us that most of the people and most of the spend is still active in the innovation space, in the research and innovation space. As far as the CSR goals are concerned, I feel that we have enough data in place of people who need. See, at the base of it, you have to map people who are ready to give, whether it is direction, time, money, or any other form of help to someone from a category who does not have access to those resources. So that is where CSR would fit in, right? And in that mapping, I think AI has got a great scope. It is definitely something, and I'm sure a lot of the CSR active players and the bigger players in the market will definitely be interested in funding. Their funding going into this kind of a research, That is something that definitely we should be looking at, and it would work, yes.
Well, my take is that all the research that is happening at the private sector companies is solving for private sector issues, corporates. And what will happen is that we will take a solution and find a problem. It is a solution finding a problem which will happen for public usage. And it is like a hammer finding a nail. So what happens is that for CSR, we will have to bubble up our problems. We will have to find a way to have our R&D of usage. Otherwise, it will be a misfit for us. We'll take these use cases of generating proposals, generating something which is not of use for us. But what I just shared a few examples like Vadvani, the problem was of child mortality. And when you bubble up such problems, so some very specific solutions where you want to impact will come up. If you wait for corporate to develop those solutions, then those will be misfit. So I think it is time for the CSR companies to also put their hat in and start thinking of what problem they would want to solve, and look at this technology to help them scale it, solve it at speed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have a few minutes left. I want to invite questions because I'm sure there'll be some. We'll start here. Can we get him a mic, please?
Bombay Chamber for giving this opportunity of listening on the subject, the experts, the morning session and this session. The entire exercise, when every player who are there, whether the company, whether the donor or implementer, everybody having their show. I can only remember my student days when I was a Leo president. We were told to do some social activity with 1,000 rupees, purchase some exercise book, pencil, rubber. The table was full of that in 1,000 rupees. But then our senior came from Lions Club. अभी अग्रवाल जी के हाथ से देंगे, अभी सिंघानिया जी के हाथ से देंगे, अभी डालमिया जी के हाथ से देंगे. So 10 rupiah was a photo cost. I thought at the end of the 8, I'm spending some money on the administration, another thing. So when I see the entire, we have almost 6.5 lakh villages, 800 district, 140 crore population, 28 state and 8 union territory. Earlier we used to say roti, kapda and makan. Now I'll add the education and health also. These are 5 tattva which we all need. The time has come because I feel everybody is concerned and all the organizations who are working are doing their best to reach. But entire process, I think the program has to be related with the government and the need of the country. We don't have to see what the Europe is doing, what is the USA is doing, but what is needed here. What is needed here. And that has to be, I feel, a person who stays in Delhi or Bombay goes all the way to any part of the eastern zone. Anybody is here, he goes that. So a lot of money, administration, timing. Money is the one thing, the timing of the expert, the timing of the people. I think time has come when this is a real thing which you are doing. In a digital era, whether it's the AI, Chat GPT, or all other analytical data of that, we know what is the hunger, what is the need, what is the requirement. Now one has to integrate, take one district to some group, because what is the need of the education, what is the need of the health of that district, and go accordingly do. So a lot of things, I think, what I want to convey, time has come, maybe the 20% of the fund could be there, flexibility. 80% goes to one pool, and then the entire expertise are pulled together to do on a very systematic way, so that everybody feels there is a need of education here, there is a need of skill here, there is a need of health is there, and it goes properly. I believe I have conveyed my message. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I think there was a question here.
Hi. Just following up with your earlier conversation. So, firstly, to the point of cost of computing, right? I think so. Once the world moves from bits to qubits, once quantum computing comes into play, a lot of use cases for AI will be accelerated in the sense that at the moment, AI, the current energy infrastructure in the world is not capable of powering the AI systems. Specifically the data centers. And once quantum computing comes in, the cost of computing goes down drastically. The cost of doing the same task and data processing goes significantly reduces, right? So just a follow-up question on that. Are there any CSR organizations thinking about, so I'm not sure if there's a data point on correlation between the cost of CSR funds put in and the amount of impact made in whatever measure. So my perspective is that the cost of impact will go down drastically once you have things like quantum computing and AI converging and a lot of use cases developing from there, right? So with the same amount of dollars, we'll be able to make significantly higher impact. Are there any organizations thinking on those lines? And if yes, what are the thoughts around, AI is just one enabler, but quantum computing is a much larger thing in the making. Probably we are just 5-10 years away from the world it's it becoming, governments are already working on that. They have all organizations on that. But coming into the folklore, it'll be a huge breakthrough.
Of course, so it will change the paradigm fully once we have quantum, but you're presuming that it will not be as expensive. It could be even more expensive. It could be even more expensive as it comes. So the challenges will be very different, and it is still a technology which is still 10 years away. And what we should think of is, and the speed of change of technology today, with the kind of LLMs, etc., we have seen, I think we will see more exciting things happening. With the current compute, cost will go down, different mechanisms will come. There are models which may not need that heavy training. So you will have mechanisms where a little higher compute can deliver for you. Like I said, Apple has a very different model of delivering on edge compute. So things will happen without quantum compute also. To the rest of your equation, obviously, the cost of impact should go down, or the cost or the impact should increase. The time for that should be much lesser, or whichever way. Obviously, that will happen if technology enables it at scale.
Specifically to healthcare and other use cases which
Of
CSR
course.
funds are deployed
Of course,
towards.
of course.
So yeah, thanks.
So there was another part to your question about are there organizations in the philanthropic space thinking about this? Ekster Foundation, actually, one of the interesting things they do is a People Plus AI initiative. I'm sure people in the room are aware of it. They do a bunch of interesting things under the People Plus AI umbrella. One of the things they do is something called open cloud compute. The simple thesis was that, of course, everybody does not have access to a GPU, and consequently, they don't have access to the compute power. Can we, at the very least, if I had to draw an analogy, it's like an aggregator. So it's basically a platform that makes available, say, I'm a developer, I'm writing some bit of code, now I need computing power to kind of put that to life and validate it. It's basically a platform that allows me to see providers of compute power. Now, these are not huge providers such as the bigger conglomerates in India. These are maybe smaller companies which have access and can sell to you compute power based on the facilities they've built up. What they've done is created a platform where, as a developer, I could go on, I can see at what rates is it available, what kind of computing power, and then I can use it. What this does is a few things. Obviously, it's creating a market. So I'm not now beholden to approaching one big guy to approach that, to get that compute power, but I get an option. I get options. It's also what ONDC is trying to do in some sense, but basically it's providing options of compute power. So there are interesting thoughts happening, but again, it's all at such a nascent stage, and we're all trying to kind of just wrap our head around it.
You could also consider NGO Darpan. See what amount of data they have on it. And I'm sure I did hear some thoughts about AI being one of the things that they're trying to develop on NGO Darpan. That's again a Government of India initiative. Maybe you could take a look at it also.
Hello. I just had one question. So we are talking about data. So as we all know, data is, nobody wants to share data basically. So it's very personal to all of us. So whether it is CSR, whether it is NGOs, data is personal. So, and data is variable. So it can change from day 1 to day 2. It can be different in the morning, it can be different in the evening. Okay? So my question, or I ask myself this question is, being a data person, the conversations that we have in the board is not basically the 90%, 90% achieved wala. Why that 10% is not achieved? These are the board, the questions that we normally talk about. Why is the 10% not achieved? And I think so, I would not want an answer. Basically, I don't know if there is an answer. Why this 10% is not achieved lies in various variables that differ. Like when I say कि मैं गोली दे रहा हूँ, गोली का असर क्यों नहीं हो रहा है, 10% पे क्यों नहीं हो रहा है, ठीक है, उस पे 100 reasons रहेंगे, but how can AI, get me which are those variables why this 10% is not being achieved? And that is, I think so, something that the NGOs will require in a huge manner to convince the people from the other side.
Yeah, totally. And I'm 100% sure you can build that 10% model. I'm 100% sure it is that 10% that is being targeted, which is why AI is taking off big time now. Data is, of course, yours, which is why we need the regulations. We need people to give consent to data. Personal experience, I had a health condition for which they wanted to take some data about me for research, and I was asked for a consent form regarding it. And if my things have been saved, I wouldn't say what they are, have been saved for further research. Yes, they have been. And I have voluntarily given that permission. And I am a person who does not share photographs on social media. So it is up to you whether you want to share the data or not. And the reason why AI is taking off and catching global fancy is because of its ability to answer those 10% of those questions. The minute it gets data on its hands, as I said, ChatGPT never, it's a conversational. So a person like me, I am waiting for, what you were asking for, sir, is hyper-specific customization, which is what AI is all about. So in fact, the technical person in me is waiting for a domain come conversational kind of model where, again, going back to the agri-stack, in the local language, the agri-stack advises a farmer what to do and how to do. It's a far-off dream, but it's a dream nonetheless. It's a combination of an NLP, it's a combination of a lot of artificial intelligence, other elements there, as well as a conversational model, you know. So if you are asking whether that 10% can be addressed, in fact, the system is getting so popular because it is not just the 10%, but also all the unserviced kind of, so far unserviced geographies also that can be addressed. Possibilities, yes.
Thank you for the insightful discussion. Now I would like to invite Mr. Sandeep Khosla to present the mementos to our speakers. I request all the speakers to stay back for a group photograph.